Are you finished?
I've only just begun.
I take it we're not inviting anyone today.
It's a bit late now.
We got.
It's more hassle. I don't. It's nice having a guest on occasionally, but well, that reminds me. We should acknowledge and say thank you because Simon Says podcast mentioned us.
Oh, okay.
We had a recommendation on the one that Simon was on a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Corruption.
Okay. Well, I haven't listened to that podcast so much, so I can't per se recommend it myself. If you would like to recommend,
Simon Says Pod on Twitter. Simon Says podcast. It's now actually almost a two-man show now.
This is like right before the intro as well, so anyone listening to this will...
It's got the gold spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Phil actually who's the co-host of Simon Says podcast now. They're watching through all the Marvel films, but they're not doing it proper. Like they're not doing all the TV series and the one-shots as well, like what we are. Well, like what I am, me and Mum. Yeah, I've started reading the Marvel comics as well now.
Of course,
like, but in chronological
you can't
order.
Follow the plots of the regular movies that make sense. I don't know how you're going to handle comic books.
I can.
No, there's so many universes going on in comic books. They redo it all the time, and it's
I know,
so.
But I'm starting
confusing.
at the very beginning, the dawn of history.
What?
Well,
Sorry, with like the 60s comics or something.
No. Before that, it's the ones that I started with are. I'm actually on the Saga of the Serpent at the moment. It was like how it started off with how Midgard and Asgard came to be, and how it all came out of the abyss and stuff. And Set and Chthon, the serpent god Set, is the Saga of the Serpent God thingy. And anyway, but I'm going to be reading through a lot of Conan stuff. And eventually, there's 27,000, or there's more than 27,000 comics in the Marvel Unlimited library. So it's going to take me a while.
Yeah. You're going to lose the plot of those so quickly.
No, I'm not as thick as you.
No, it's just because you ask kind of confusing questions in the middle of a movie.
Yeah, but the reason they're confusing to you is because you haven't watched all the other stuff that me and Mum have.
I guess.
So you don't know how a lot of it ties together with the backstory that's not in the movies.
Well, never mind. Anyway,
yeah, thanks, Phil, for the recommendation. He has a podcast as well, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay.
We'll be mentioning him later on as well.
Do you want to get started?
I suppose we should. Go.
Hello, Internet. Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt.
Oh, yeah, and I'm the Orbiter. Hello.
You're a twat.
I am not.
You might want to edit around that sentence.
Before we begin, I would like to mention that one of our avid listeners has made a request.
Ooh.
Which I have
what kind of request?
They want to buy us some beer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Have you looked into that at all?
I have created a beer list. I haven't put anything on it yet, but by the time this goes live on Thursday, you and I, or me probably, will have populated it with some, and there will be a link in the description. If anybody out there wants to buy us a beer, we've got an Amazon wish list of beer, and we will gladly consume said beer while chatting shit. And if you put a message in with it when you get it delivered to us, we'll even shout out your name.
You seem to be struggling not to burp in the middle of that sentence quite a bit.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So, what's happening today?
Well, do you want to get started with the news? Quite a bit's happened.
Oh, I read a funny thing today. It's some guy from one of the African nations has been tweeting about. It was like a parody of the Arab Spring stuff, but talking about how everything's kicking off in America and that they're going to send peacekeeping, and urging for the government to kind of show restraint against its citizens, and that they're going to send peacekeepers over there.
Well, I mean,
and they're calling it the American Spring.
Sort of joking about that, but genuinely, the police in America have gotten pretty fucked. Particularly recently. I mean, they're fucked anyway, but
not all of them. There have been some pretty good pictures coming out of police and National Guard shaking hands with the protesters, at which they shouldn't be because of coronavirus, but doing the taking the knee thing. Of course, there have also been videos of police giving the white power salute and stuff like that, but it's a mixed bag. It's not all of them. So
anyone within that sort of sphere, I guess, who's not actively condemning the actions of other police officers and trying to do something from within the system, though, is kind of part of the problem.
Yeah. But that taking the knee and shaking hands on camera with the protesters is condemning.
It's something,
really.
But I've seen a fair amount of stuff just getting worse from police. But basically, sort of how this started meant, I mean, there's been general tension and outrage at how police have particularly treated black people and have
it's kind of snowballed though, hasn't it? It's more about inequality now. There is racism intermixed with that purely because the inequality is kind of very heavily linked to race in America, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of generally the justice system there is weighted against black people, and
there's been protests here as well,
rightfully so,
because
London,
our police
aren't
Birmingham, Cardiff.
Although
not about our police, just about the American situation.
There are fair protests to be made about our police too, because although they don't have guns, which means that they're less likely to kill people, I mean, they don't use guns as much. Police brutality still exists in Britain.
Yeah.
And black people are still disproportionately affected by laws in Britain.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's nearly as bad as it is in America, but that's not really saying much, is it? So.
No. Also, basically, it's kind of difficult because things have sort of developed quite quickly with this. This started with the extrajudicial murder of a black man, George Floyd, I think his name was, who I believe there was a woman who was doing something wrong to her dog. And
that doesn't sound right at all.
I think she was possibly choking a dog. I can't remember exactly. And this guy, George Floyd, said to her something along the lines of, you won't like what I'm going to do next, after asking her to stop doing that. Basically alluding to calling the police, but because of the sort of general
prejudice,
that I think she took that as meaning that he was going to do something violent towards her, because I'm imagining she's racist. And from that point on, police officer got involved, tried to detain George Floyd, and kneeled on his neck for 9 minutes as he was saying that he couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And following that, he died. So following that, protests started, and it seemed like they were sort of developing into riots, particularly in Minneapolis, which I think is the city that happened in.
Yeah, I mean, there's still peaceful protests going on as well.
Yeah. But it is also worth saying there's a fair amount of suspicion around how those developed into riots that white supremacist groups might be sparking.
That was the ridiculous thing that I thought when Trump came out saying that, or basically accusing hard left-wing radicals for causing all the trouble, and it's like, but this is a very right-wing situation.
Yeah,
it's like, what do you mean?
Well, yeah,
it just doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah, there's suspicions there that white supremacist groups were starting to burn things to sort of make it look worse. I think it started as a peaceful protest. I've seen videos of organisers actively blocking people from trying to burn stuff down.
Thing is, as well,
quite a few black people's houses have been burned down in Minneapolis, from what I understand.
But once you get to a certain point and the kind of fever pitch boils over, as it were, it becomes less about the original thing that caused it. It is just a catalyst, really. It was a situation that
there's a fair amount of anger being brought up here.
Yeah, but it's not just about. I mean, that was
not related to that, but it's very related to the systemic injustices that caused that to happen.
Yeah. Mm.
So yeah, following this, Trump's response to this, the sort of initial protests developing into a riot in Minneapolis, was when the looting starts, we start shooting, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Which Twitter had to
there's
put a notification on that this was against their guidelines glorifying violence.
This is all moving quite quickly, so I think most people will know like all of this.
Well, some people aren't as involved with social media, so they might not.
No, but the news, most people see.
Quite a fair amount of people don't watch the news that much.
Okay.
So yeah, Twitter had to step in and say, this is glorifying violence, but we'll keep it here because it's in the public interest to keep this here, since it's from the fucking president of the United States. So this, in some way, along with, how Trump just generally complains about the news and media being against him, trying to remove protections for social media companies, basically treating them more like publishers if they're going to keep stuff up that they don't, and like put.
I'd like to talk about
clarifications
where you think all this is heading.
Well, I'll get to that. So I have seen various videos of police around America and also in Britain, it's worth saying, being excessively violent, as well as just harassing people that have nothing even to do with the protests. It's in like pushing an elderly man down that was just walking away from them.
But like you say, I mean, it is a systemic thing as well, because you've got like lorry drivers driving their tankers into crowds of people and stuff, and kind of.
In New York, there were 2 police SUVs that drove into crowds of people, and that's a fairly big story.
Did you saw Black Klansman, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. That was a fucking good film. But it became a good film specifically because of the ending. The rest of it just kind of didn't have you. The statement, if you watched like the first half of it, or even the first 9/10 of it, you'd think, well, what's all the fuss about? Why is this regarded as such a good film? But then that ending, no spoilers, but that just like I love films like that where you get like not a punchline, but you know what I mean. There's the last scene kind of just makes sense of the whole thing.
I thought it was fairly clear. all the way through, from what I remember.
Yeah, but it was quite light-hearted and jokey, most of it. It was quite. It was a very dated kind of humorous kind of almost frivolous look at the situation the guy was in. The black police officer bloke.
I'm not sure about that, but
it seemed that way to me. Perhaps because I'd seen a lot of drama from that era, and it was made in that kind of style where it was, it was treated. Racism was kind of treated as almost like a comedy kind of tool, if you like.
Yeah, I'm thinking we watched different films.
Well,
I think
it might be because I lived through that kind of media
towards
era.
The end of it did sort of, because I don't think that's based on a true story.
Well, the footage at the end was actual footage, though, was real footage from the riots, not the riots, the protests.
Well, I think maybe that's what you're talking about, sort of like bringing it to non-fiction, I guess, rather than.
But the main character was portrayed as a very kind of, I don't know. I mean, I felt like he was almost caricatured to a certain extent. Like the hairdo was like massive. Do you know what I mean? It was the kind of hairdo that you would have had in that era of if you were of that race, probably. But it was almost like it was overstated.
Okay.
To me,
I didn't really think that, but okay. Right, going from what's happening with the protest, though. Basically, it seems that a lot of the violence that's been started has been due to police and possibly outside groups that aren't really interested to do with anything to do with Black Lives Matter or whatever. That they just want to start shit and they want to burn stuff, essentially. I mean, there are some people who are wanting to burn stuff because they're angry about systemic injustice. But it seems to me like a lot of the violence has been started by police in these situations more.
It's a powder keg situation, isn't it? I mean, especially riots tend to. I mean, that's the thing at the moment. We're kind of approaching what you might think of as riot season. Most riots tend to happen in the heat of summer, when, especially if there are things, social injustices going on that are coming to a head. And obviously, there's a lot of pressure on politically and socially at the moment, anyway. But it's kind of added to all the mounting injustices that we've had over a long period of time. Yeah. It gets to the point where once it boils over, there's almost like a critical mass where it's not that it doesn't matter what it was originally about, but people aren't thinking about that. They're just
It does feel like a lot
rioting.
Of people's attitude has changed towards police, though, in general. Sort of, I have seen, I mean, it might be because I'm more involved with Twitter now. I've seen a lot more people calling for real change, like possibly even a revolution. I've seen Anonymous getting involved, which, they don't fuck around. Also, Trump, and this is to do with sort of scapegoating far left groups, designated Antifa as a terrorist organisation.
Yeah, you mentioned that a while ago.
Now, do you know what Antifa is?
Anti-something.
Anti-fascist.
Yeah.
Now, place your bets as to who might designate anti-fascism as a terrorist organisation, and also
I'm not defending Trump in any way here, but a label is just a label. I mean, if that's exactly what they are, just an anti-fascist organisation, then fair enough.
They're not an organisation, though.
Well, all right, then if it's
Antifa's a general philosophy.
Well, it's a similar kind of thing with Extinction Rebellion, wasn't it?
I imagine it was used by anti-apartheid movements in South Africa. it applies to some groups in America against white supremacy. Anonymous, I guess, would fall under this.
I think it is important to remember, though, that we see what we see of the police in America, and we see the shocking scenes that can happen. I personally haven't been in any of those situations, and the police here do a lot of good work. There are, every time I come into contact with the police here, I have absolutely no problem with the way that they've acted and behaved. But then I haven't really been... The nearest I've been, I think, to a pressure situation like that would have been when we went down to the Make Poverty History rallies.
And there's like protests and stuff like that, but like keep in mind you're also white, so you're less likely to experience discrimination from police.
Yeah, if you're focusing on racism, yeah.
Well, that's the issue here.
Yeah, well,
it's the main issue.
It's one of the issues.
There are other issues to do with general anger at the system.
And the thing that
class disparity.
The thing that it's escalated to highlight, though, is and this is, like I say, closely linked with race in America, especially, is the inequality, and I think that's coming out across the board. It's becoming more obvious because of the whole coronavirus thing and how it's affected different people in different places in society. There's the statistics that black people are more likely to die from it,
Yeah.
And it's there's so many different things interlinked with that it's difficult to kind of pin it down to any one thing. But that's the point, isn't it? It's a structural problem in society. It's like you can't necessarily say that because somebody's obese, then they're more likely to die from it, and that's just a simple situation like that. Because the thing is, they're obese because of something else, because of the way that they are treated and regarded by society.
But with these
the opportunities that they get
specifically, you cannot separate them from police brutality on the basis of race.
No, you can't separate them, but there is more being protested.
I can understand that.
That's not the only problem that people are rioting about.
No, but
it is what kicked it off.
But the protests are mainly about racial injustice.
Yeah.
There's generally more anger there because, like with any sociological issue, it's all interlinked, and generally because of the systemic and historical injustices against black people, it does become a bit of a class issue as well.
Yeah. But like you say, it's probably, well, I'm sure it definitely is more the case that, say, somebody like me found themselves in the lower kind of class, trapped in injustice or inequality in society. It would be much easier for me to elevate myself from that than it would a black person. I get that.
But with that whole sort of idea of lifting yourself out of poverty thing, that's kind of bollocks as well, especially in America where you're punished for being poor.
Yeah, all I'm saying is it would be an easier prospect for me, as a white person, to make improvements to my life.
Yeah, you're less likely to... One of the main things, I guess, a thing that would stand out to me there is you're less likely to experience employment discrimination or be seen as dangerous.
That's interesting because I can't really sort of give any specifics, but in my workplace, I am actually in quite a minority, quite a large minority, being British, or a small minority, if you know what I mean.
Right. I guess. But I mean, sort of.
I think the difficulty is it's not just about what the actual. Yes, it is a certain amount to do with the barriers and obstacles that you've got to overcome that are inherent in other people and their prejudices, but also it's about overcoming your own. If you're starting from a point where you think you're going to be prejudiced against because you are, then that kind of adds to it as well, because I don't know, you've got to have self-belief to achieve anything. And if you're within a society that you know is going to be prejudiced against you from the start, then it's more difficult for you to believe in yourself than it is for somebody else.
I guess.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
In some ways, like, people are sort of, because it would be like the sort of comments that you might get would be sort of be quite a regular occurrence. Mm-hmm. They sort of would infiltrate into your psyche, and this is true of I guess any oppressed class, where you sort of start to in some ways echo what other people have said towards yourself, and you have to sort of catch yourself and go, actually, no, why would
bearing in mind that
that's...
there's not actually a huge amount of other news going on other than this and the whole coronavirus thing. I wonder whether it's worth trying to link this into the subject of the podcast in terms of how other people's attitudes kind of whether or not, see, racism, as with sexism, it's not just about whether or not you think you're racist or sexist, because most people don't.
No, there's a fairly small subset of racists that are proud to say they're racist.
Yeah, but there's also a kind of
it's quite a
tendency for everyone to think that it's not about that they're not racist, but that they are going to be coloured by, that's the wrong word, that their decisions and the way they act is going to be affected by the general views of society around them without them even knowing it. You know, you can act in a prejudiced way without intending to.
I guess sort of I think we've probably said this before, is to not really think of that as a binary, because you can be racist and still not be a terrible person. It's just that you need to catch yourself on thinking certain things and sort of educate yourself to be less racist, or be less prejudiced in general.
It's a difficult one, because I'm trying to steer this into the subject, so I'm going to try and make it about sexism as much as racism.
Before you do that, just notes on Antifa being labelled a terrorist organisation. It's worth noting as well, in America, the KKK is not designated as a terrorist organisation. And many of the mass shootings happen in America.
Is Antifa?
Well, Antifa's just been designated
by
the US government.
Oh, I thought you said Donald Trump.
Well, I've seen something from Trump saying that the US is going to designate it as a terrorist organisation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it is, though.
No, I mean, that's the difficulty as well with Trump announcing things over Twitter. It's a sort of unofficial but also official at the same time, because it could be illegal to do that, considering it's not even an organisation, so it's kind of impossible to designate it as a terrorist organisation, let alone an organisation.
He says a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but when he sort of says that with the US is going to when he says it using fairly official language, we can assume it's at least something that he's going to.
Yeah,
try
I'm not
to
saying
do.
it's a wrong. I'm not saying it's okay for him to be saying this stuff. It's just that he just comes out with so much bullshit. I don't really kind of. If he says that something's going to happen, it's like, yeah, sure.
He's
I'll
still
believe it when I see
though.
it. Yeah, for now.
It means that they're moving to make it a terrorist organization in the US's eyes if it's not already.
We shall see.
But yeah, the KKK is not considered one. Many white supremacist groups aren't considered one. And considering the amount of mass shootings that have proven links to white supremacist groups, it really does not send a good signal when...
It's not a surprise, though. I mean, it's wrong, but it's not a surprise because, Tony Blair is not regarded as a war criminal.
Right. It sort of goes to this thing of, like, when the Charlottesville protests happened and it was the Nazis at that protest that ended up killing someone, and he was still very reluctant to criticise the fucking Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. I get why you're kind of frustrated and annoyed by it, but it's just like the world just expects this shit from him now. It's like
I guess,
kind of,
but like when you're explicitly anti-fascist, that means, and you're a government, kind of means they're just openly fascist now.
Yeah,
I mean that's what I see it as. Or at least on the side of the fascists. I mean, you could very correctly make an argument about it before, but now it's sort of official.
Yeah.
Especially given I don't think I've seen him condemning any of the police brutality that's happening at protests, making them more violent.
Yeah, I think the general, I don't disagree with you on most of what you're saying. It's just, my general kind of attitude, I think, has spilled over into real life now. Over the last few weeks, I've been trying to not completely block myself off from social media and news and stuff, but reduce my intake. And I think in the process of that, it's kind of spilling over into my real life in that I just try not to, I'm trying to be just an observer. It's right that to flag it up, and I mean, I'd be scared shitless if it was happening here. Riots an inch. Can you imagine?
It wouldn't happen here because...
No, but...
I mean, it's a pretty small place already.
But I've lived in London where riots have happened.
Yeah. And one of the most famous riots there happened due to police brutality.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's something that needs to be, I think policed is the wrong word, but it's something that needs to be kept an eye on. But I still think that the majority in this country of police are doing a good job. It's always the bad apples, isn't it? It's the ones you from the way you're talking,
it's a systemic problem.
Yeah,
and whilst there can be good people,
the way
that
you're
are part
talking
of that,
adds to the problem. It adds fuel to the fire because it sounds like you're accusing the entire police force of being racially prejudiced and brutal.
But when it's enough of it and it's a systemic problem and people aren't standing up and stopping it.
But this is the problem when you expose yourself to so much social media. All you're seeing is a sensationalist stuff.
It's just...
when you've been in situations where the police have kept you safe.
I can appreciate that the idea of police isn't inherently bad. It's just the police systems at the moment are inherently corrupt.
Yeah, they need changing. What I'm slightly in defence of is the good ones, because they're getting tarred with the same brush, and it's like, yes, the system does need to change, but that's true across society, not just in the police.
Yeah, but it's not about, oh, we'll reform it, we'll make it better when people are dying.
So what is it about?
Actually changing things.
Yeah, but this is
why people riot. This is why people protest.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happening. But again, I say that it would be wrong. It would be prejudiced to assume that if you see a policeman coming towards you or a policewoman, that they are going to be racially prejudiced.
I guess, but
because that's as prejudiced as part of the people you're accusing.
Policy. It's part of policy to racially profile people, particularly in the Met Police.
But
it's part of New York police policy. The corruption comes from the top.
Yeah. A racial is one aspect of it, but it's also part of policy to profile people on all sorts of aspects. I mean, I got stopped and asked what was in my pockets walking around London because I had long hair and a black leather jacket on. It happened to be a comb, but they were just checking that I didn't have a knife in my pocket. Now, that I don't think stop and search was a thing back then. It was just one of those kind of... I agree with you to a large extent. I would just remember that there are a lot of people who do a lot of good work in that.
I can appreciate that. There's people trying to do a job and that got into that trying to do some good for people. And it can be difficult when you're faced with orders from the top, and
unfortunately a lot of those people probably end up leaving. If the system is really that bad, they'll just give up on it. But it's like everything else, isn't it, that you can affect the best change from within.
Well, it's just that things don't really seem to be changing from within, so this keeps happening.
I think things happen in waves. I mean, I would certainly say that across society, in this country, racism is a lot less than it used to be. There is still a huge imbalance.
Our government, though, is still inherently racist. I'm not saying everyone in the government is racist, but the government has specifically racist policies. The whole hostile environment thing was fucking horrific.
I found quite interesting, actually. There was an interview with Boris Johnson. I can't remember. It was one of the... I don't know if it was one of his MPs or something, but they were asking him questions about this constituent who had been living here since, I think, 2008 and been working all that time and had paid into the system.
This recently.
Yes, I think it was either today or yesterday. And the problem that they were having, because of the government policy, that because they were... there was something about their situation which meant that they were here on license to work, but the license provisions were that they weren't entitled to any sort of benefits kind of provisions while they were here. So they could come here to work, but they weren't entitled to any sort of government support. And of course now, that's a massive issue because they can't get any of this furlough stuff but what I thought was an interesting I mean he looked like he was saying all the right things, and he was like, this is a really worrying situation, you're really right to have brought it to our attention, and we're definitely looking into this.
Did he actually do anything about it though?
Well, it was only like today or yesterday. There are a lot of people that are in the same situation, but what I thought was interesting was one of the first questions he asked was, which country did they come from? And I just thought, how is that in any way relevant? It's like, why is that one of the first questions you would think of?
The only way that could really be relevant is, if they were from the EU, their immigration status might be different, but there's still freedom to work here.
Well, no, because if they were here working under a license, under an immigrant license, then they wouldn't have been from with the EU. They were actually from Pakistan, but I just thought, what a blatantly strange question to ask. Why does it matter where they're from? like you say, that's a stark admittance that
They could be white. It could be okay.
that we treat people different based on where they come from.
Also, something sort of inherently unjust about our political system is someone who's white generally has more influence to make to hold politicians to account.
Yeah. Can we move into sexism?
We can.
I know it's a massive issue, and I do.
Yeah.
We do agree on the vast majority of it. I suppose I'm a bit of an optimist, really.
I think we have got a subject at some point to do with racism.
I was going to say, are we doing all the isms?
No, what isms are there?
Jism?
I mean, there's like ableism and ageism.
Just like sweep that under the carpet.
I think we have got one on age, and we've done one on disability. I'm not sure how much we talked about ableism in that.
Ableism. So yeah, sexism. Now, I said that I was going to mention Phil again, and I don't want him to think like I'm picking on him, because I've mentioned I tore into him a little bit on my Better Call Paul, because he was talking about Captain Marvel. And you know what's coming, don't you?
Yeah.
And he's a really nice guy, so I'm not being nasty about him or anything. Hi Phil, be nice to me when we ever meet. He's cool. But he knows that people will accuse him of being sexist because of his views about that film. It's not that he thinks it's a particularly bad film. It's just that his view is that it's kind of just. It's just like having all that year was kind of the Me Too movement, and kind of having all that sort of rammed down your throat sort of thing. And I just don't get. I didn't get that. But the reason I bring it up is because I don't want to like be down on anyone about it. It's just I don't understand how it's ramming something down your throat when, if you look at the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's. So far, is that not the only one that has a female lead character, or the title character?
One of the title characters of Ant-Man and the Wasp was.
Oh yeah, that's true. And I suppose technically the Avengers include
only one of them.
Again, they're a minority though.
Yeah.
So this brings up the situation that I think my point about is that it feels like something's being rammed down your throat when, or it feels like something's being pushed on you when it's attempting to redress a balance that's already been way out of whack.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, you get this with people complaining about women in movies, and it does seem to be mainly whenever there's a female lead or
I did consider
any slightly feminist message. But also you get this with sort of when people say Black Lives Matter.
He's not the only person. I mean, you knew what I was going to say.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that have said a similar kind of thing, that they don't like that particular film because of the kind of. I don't even see it as a feminist message. Well, it depends what you mean by feminist. See, to me, true feminism should be about equality, not favouring women. But the unfortunate thing about it is, and this is perhaps what I'm talking about, is that in a situation where everything is biased in one direction, to redress that balance, you have to bias things in the other direction for a while.
Well, it's sort of like, let's just take a film. Go from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Say 4. It centers on a male character. I think most of the characters are male, although there is a love interest who's a woman. It's mainly about men, right? I mean, gods technically, but male characters.
Yeah,
you wouldn't say that movie is inherently sexist, but it's also it doesn't really do anything to address sexism in any way.
Well, I think what it probably does is reflect, is kind of fairly accurately reflect the attitudes of the society that it's kind of brought out in. Do you know what I mean? It would be easy to see something as sexist if it's trying to redress a balance where it's already... I've already said that, haven't I? Already out of whack. Do you know what I mean? It's how do you pull things back the other way without favouring? Say, for instance, you've got a company that employs 90% males and 10% females, and you're advertising for new jobs. In order to redress the balance in that workforce,
right,
for that particular job, you would have to heavily favour the female applicants, and that would seem to be ramming it down someone's throat. That would seem to be sexist.
Yeah, I mean,
when you look at it in isolation,
that sort of thing's generally called like positive discrimination.
Yeah,
where someone, that sort of thing where there's a certain diversity quota to have a broader range of voices and generally make the workforce more representative of the general population, I guess.
See, I don't know whether I'm a particularly accurate representation of the general sort of male gender of the species. It's just I don't. Me and Mum were watching the Dark Crystal series on Netflix, and it wasn't until we got like right through to it wasn't even the last episode. It was when we were watching the documentary on the making of it afterwards that it was brought up that the whole thing is set in a matriarchal society,
Right.
and all the powerful figures, all the leaders, are female characters, and it was like I didn't even notice. It's like this stuff about films like that have a heavy sort of female kind of message. I don't even notice.
I think
I think it's probably because I actually think most men are complete and utter dicks. It's like that's including myself. So it's kind of. One thing I did think when I was thinking about this episode was, what do you think of the phrase "man up"?
Generally outdated. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really heard it that much in recent years from anyone that I remotely respect.
Yeah, because it does happen the other way around. I've been told to man up at work in a workplace where it was mostly females working there.
Yeah, I've only really heard it recently in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way.
I think it's getting better in that sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that society is beginning to recognise that you can actually, especially with all the statistics over sort of male suicide and stuff, that it's okay to show emotions.
See, that's the thing with the patriarchy. It's sort of, I've generally heard this analogy to describe issues of systemic injustice and why people focus more on the oppressed classes, even though that oppression can have negative effects on, like for example, the patriarchy has negative effects on men, where that sort of idea of being tough and being the leader and having to show no emotion, even though that's largely a system created by men, it does negatively affect men. It's sort of like the analogy I've heard is it's like a house is on fire.
Mm.
You don't send firefighters to the houses that aren't on fire. But this is sort of like, the house is on fire, but the fire has spread to another house.
Mm.
You would still put out the first fire.
Out of interest, I mean, obviously, it seems on the surface that it's a good idea to have female leadership as well as male leadership in different roles. Do you believe that the two female prime ministers we have had have done anything for the cause of, or for the for opportunities, for the image of women in power?
Not really, no. They've generally been... Being a woman doesn't make you a feminist, by the way. Just supporting women in general isn't a good thing on its own.
I mean, Theresa May is one thing, but certainly Maggie Thatcher even more. It's like, you know, you can be a woman and be a dickhead.
I mean, to be fair, most of our prime ministers are dickheads.
That's true.
Yeah, if you're gonna say in general, no, they've had policies that were just generally shit for people.
See, there's a difficult, oh, not difficult. There's an important hurdle to overcome, I think, when you're talking about treating people equally, regardless of sex or race, is that there are, or any other aspect, is that there are certain things which are just natural definitions. For instance, with the race thing, I would certainly say that there is a natural superiority among black people when it comes to physical sort of sport-based.
Okay, I can see why you'd say that, but like the reasons why you might believe that are pretty bogus science.
No, no, it's genetics, isn't it? They are better kind of physically.
Someone did from Humanist UK did a Voltaire lecture on this. I can't remember his name though. See if I can.
It's interesting. I mean, if you're contesting that, does that not then imply that?
Yeah, here we go. How to argue with a racist.
Does that not then imply that?
It's very long, but I'll see if I can find the relevant part.
That there is a positive discrimination towards black people in the sporting world.
Well, it depends what you mean by that, because quite often that would mean like exploiting them in the past, at least.
I mean, the other thing I was thinking in terms of sexism is that obviously, if it was purely a question of policy, I think it would be. I think you'd be rightly able to argue that I think it's unfair that men aren't able to give birth. But that is one of those things that you just kind of. There are certain aspects of existence that are different for different. Well, everyone's different, aren't they?
Okay. I'm gonna see
equality is more about opportunity than.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
But then how far do you take that? Because should somebody who has less ability in a particular area been given the same amount of opportunity as somebody who has more ability, inherent ability?
Well, see, that's the thing, that idea of inherent ability is pretty flawed in it of itself, because you can't remove your abilities from your upbringing.
But if you've only got one leg, you're not going to make a very good sprinter. Should you have the same opportunities?
You can make a damn good Paralympian.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, also, I would imagine our species has sort of gone past the sort of need to define our merits physically.
Yeah, but there is also. I mean, we are all different. Okay, it's not dealt with in particularly accurate ways in society, but certain people are more. I don't know what the right words are. I don't think intelligent, but
I think like
intellectually able. Don't know, than others. But it's difficult. It's difficult defining.
You can't really divorce that from their privilege, though. Like, for example, most of the top lawyers in the country, most of the top journalists in the country were privately educated. Most of our politicians, or a disproportionate amount of our politicians, privately educated. Top judges, privately educated, a plurality of which, at least.
Yeah. But there are some people that are just shit thick.
Yeah, but like, what are the Prime Minister?
Yeah, that's also true.
People can get into really high positions of influence based on no fucking merit at all.
Do you know what? I've often thought this about my situation with being a musician, that it's like, yes, a certain amount of it is about how much effort you put in, how much work you put in, what your, well, I suppose a certain amount of natural ability. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good you are at something. If you don't have something...
I mean, bringing it to that, part of the reason that you were... a fair part of the reason that you were kicked out of the Royal Academy was because you were fucking around with drugs.
I'd just like to say I wasn't kicked out of the Royal Academy.
Okay, what?
I voluntarily left.
Right, part of the reason that you left the Royal Academy... Now, if you did voluntarily leave, this is slightly different, so I'll ask you to confirm this. You know, it was fairly linked to your life situation leading up to that.
Yeah, everything for several years was on a... I honestly was mentally ill, you know. There was addiction, there was debt, there was... And I probably have been most of my life mentally ill in some way. Oh, excuse me.
But like... but
I went to a private school.
You still came from a fairly working class background going into that.
I have been accused of this. Well, you say that, but teachers aren't working class, are they?
They are.
Really?
I mean lower middle class. You can be... This is the myth that propels this idea of meritocracy, that you have to be skilled to be high paid, or like if you're not high paid, therefore you just didn't work hard enough. I would call nurses very skilled, yet they make around about 20,000 a year, I think.
Yeah, I didn't mean professionals in terms of what they get paid. I meant professionals as in their career choice, they're degree educated.
Yeah, they could be degree educated,
qualified,
but like, they're not paid enough.
Yeah, no, I agree.
They might classify
it's getting better, but
as lower middle class, but that's largely because most of the money's at the top already.
Yeah, actually, the number of people that I've seen saying that after this lockdown thing that teachers should be paid like £1 million a year because I've been trying to do the home tutoring. But yeah, certainly, I think it wasn't. See, I could have gone through all of those situations and sailed through and flown high and achieved massively if it weren't for my own self-esteem. Because it wasn't about where I came from, or it wasn't about where I was, sorry. It was about where I knew I came from. Where, you know, I knew that in that situation, I knew I came from a broken home. I knew came from a one-parent family. I knew that I was there on a government-assisted place. My parents weren't paying for me to be there. I knew, and to a certain extent, I knew I was a musician, which was seen as a lower life form in that realm as well.
Yeah. But, I mean, quite a lot of people become, like, top musicians due to being able to afford to go to private schools where they can get
nowadays. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky that it was provided free back then, but you know, we have to pay for all music tuition now.
And part of like that stereotype about like Asian kids being really good at music is due to a lot of the Asian families in typically Western countries are wealthier. Like,
What do you think about women's football? Like, in terms of...
I think it's more entertaining.
I
Not in that way where like it's enjoyable in that way.
It partly is for me, but but I know male football is highly overpaid.
Yeah.
But I mean, they get paid what they're worth.
I don't know what they're paid with women's football.
I don't think they're particularly well. Well, certainly not.
I don't think they're
men,
as highly paid, but I think they are still relatively. And I'm not sure.
It does seem to me to be a lot more this is quite eye-opening. That the word that came into my head then was that it does seem to be, to me, when I see women playing football, that they're far more manly about it.
I guess typically, but like
in terms of they don't go rolling around on the floor or diving, or they're more. It seems to be a more fair game.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that in general with a lot of women's sport. But watching like the hockey, I mean, it might be true for hockey. Why would I think
that's a manly trait? That's
just typically society's told us that it is.
Yeah. That's what I think I was talking about before, about that kind of underlying kind of sexist framework.
But yeah, you can...
rather than, because I'm not sexist, at least not deliberately, but I am aware that I am a product of a patriarchal society.
Yeah.
Which makes it easy for me to make comments like that without even realizing that I'm being sexist by saying it.
Really, the best thing you can do, I guess, the term that's often used for someone who doesn't really fall under at least many of these oppressed classes, I guess the main one for you would be working class. As far as I know, you're straight, white, a dude, and...
a dude.
Yeah. You typically... you have many of the characteristics that sort of the system's supposed to be built for, I guess. But the sort of the best thing you can do as an ally is to catch yourself when you do have those things that are a product of that society that
that's what I'm doing.
It's supposed to benefit you, and realize that those privileges that society might give you, but also realizing.
Do you know, it's something I found actually recently, and I think I've probably first kind of noticed it, I suppose, when watching, I think it was Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. There's a character in that who is, I think, trans, but I couldn't work out for a while. Oh, there was another program as well that was in space or something, but there was characters in both of those series that it wasn't clear whether or not they were male or female, but it didn't matter. And the thing that I've noticed recently is that I've started noticing people just when I'm shopping. Somebody I've seen that works at the local supermarket a few times that have sort of said hello and stuff, and been helping out with the trolleys and stuff like that. And I can't for the life of me work out when they speak to me whether or not they're male or female. But I'm happy to. I think it's interesting that I find it worthy of note that I'm noticing to myself now that is okay. Not that it's not ever been not okay, but it's just like sort of, oh yeah. It's like, it's just something I've not really thought about, It's like, and if they were, I mean, there's so many different kind of variations available, isn't there, as it were? I don't know if available is the right word.
It is sort of just how people define themselves within that. It can be.
I just find it interesting because I would, if they were in transition from one to the other, I'd be interested to know which way. But in any case, aren't there some people that choose not to be
there's not
one or the
people.
Other, and it's like I feel an obligation to, and I think I do come across like this. I feel an obligation to just treat them as normal, nice human beings.
Yeah, I mean, generally in that situation when, it's like, oh, you're probably not going to see this person a huge amount. Like, the likelihood of you needing to know much about that is pretty low. So
yeah, it's when you get to know somebody.
Refer to them generally, gender neutrally, because...
Yeah, and if you meet them socially, I suppose then it changes, or it can potentially change. In that.
But like, if you've got to know them better, I guess, where that would become something relevant to you, then it might be worth asking what their pronouns are. So
sexism, then, do you think... I mean, I came at this conversation thinking in terms of male and female prejudice. But... I mean, is sexism the right word? Should it be genderism? Is that what we're really talking about?
It's complicated. Right. I think I may have talked about these twats before. But there's a concept of TERFs, which are trans exclusionary radical feminists. Which, to be honest, isn't really accurate because I wouldn't really call them feminists. But
did they identify as TERFs? I mean, is that their...
No, that's generally a term applied to them by other people.
I was going to say, when you identify yourself as radical, there's something going wrong there.
I don't know. I would identify my views as radical within the political spectrum.
I suppose, yeah. You're acknowledging the way things are then, aren't you?
The closest leader, I guess, the closest party to my politics is miles away from my actual politics, and that's the Green Party, and they're considered pretty radical.
Oh, just something popped into my head, what we were talking about earlier on, the question that I said that Boris Johnson was answering about the licence to work in the UK with no right to government support. That was something that was introduced in the last Labour government.
Yeah, I mean,
they fucked us, didn't they? The last Labour government.
The last Labour government wasn't
Labour
as evil as the Tories.
No,
it was still shit. There were still war criminals, and they still.
But I think they've done so much damage to the real Labour Party as a whole.
Yeah, but also like now, any time that someone actually remotely left wing, like Jeremy Corbyn's in charge, people act like it's a different. Like something suddenly changed, but like, no, this is what this party was supposed to be.
Yeah,
you need a party standing up for the working class, and I guess in the interest of political balance, it makes sense to have a party.
For decades, have we? A proper.
Most of our parties could give a shit about the working class, if I'm honest. They're not quite as evil as the Tories in like actively hating them, but like. They only like them as their constituents that might vote for them.
I'm going to suggest that we take a short break. Are we going to be watching a video at some point?
Yeah, I found a sort of shorter version of that Voltaire lecture. It's by a guy, Dr. Adam Rutherford, who's a member of Humanist UK. Generally, people connected to them seem to be pretty sound. I watched their full Voltaire lecture, but it's about an hour long, so we won't be watching that. But they also did give a TED talk that's about 17 minutes, so we're going to watch that instead. And it says, "Rethink everything we know about genes and identity politics" by Adam Rutherford at TEDx Glasgow.
So I'm going to suggest we take a break there, and I'll swap cameras. We'll have a short pause while I go to the toilet, and when we come back, we'll watch that video, and then we'll be back with you.
Okay.
Oh my god! I might as well swap cameras, did I say? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You can continue to entertain the troops if you wish.
The troops? Okay. I wasn't aware that we're a military organisation now. Yeah, so this is just sort of... whatever, I don't know. I woke up at 6 p.m. today. I don't know. I mean, you know what's weird? I had a nightmare about being kidnapped by Nigel fucking Farage, and I don't know why. I haven't thought about him for months because he's sort of disappeared from politics because he's irrelevant now since he's done the one purpose he had. But like, why would I dream about that? And then also, like, I had a dream about going to Turkey and finding a hotel room and there was someone in the bath who only spoke Polish for some reason, but some random guy that me and someone I think I knew were with was apparently from Poland, so that turned out okay. That's weird. I was talking about my dream about getting kidnapped by Nigel Farage.
Oh, while I remember, I should just say, Phil that I was speaking about earlier, who is a solid chap, but just doesn't like Captain Marvel. The other podcast that I know of that he does is one with Craig. He co-hosts Morlando.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, just throw that in there. And
are we going to
break?
Yeah.
Well, hello there.
Right, we're back. So basically, with that video, I mean, the sort of general message there, they talked about sort of...
I'm a Viking.
Well, yeah, they talked about sort of royal families and how there's this sort of idea of, they have this genetic trait, and also the Habsburgs, which are probably the most inbred family in history.
I just actually sat here and thought, well, that means if you go far enough back, you and I will have some shared ancestry.
You and the listener will probably, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
you and Mum will.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just genetics, really.
Yeah.
Or just generally history.
We're all just one human family.
But, like, you get this with how supposedly Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle were married into as non-royals, but, like, some people went and like did their sort of genealogy, I guess, and went, oh, they actually have a
genealogy.
What?
Genealogy.
I think it's generally called genealogy.
No, it's genealogy.
Okay.
You're going to you're going to fact check me live on the podcast, aren't you?
Well, it's genealogy because it's all the... Oh, I guess it is genealogy. It just doesn't make sense to say how much, I don't know.
You're thinking of geology.
I've generally heard it referred to as genealogy.
Yeah, but that's not right.
Never mind, whatever. Anyway, it was generally found that they had a common isopoint ancestor with Edward III, which quite a few people do actually.
Who is Charlemagne, by the way?
Charlemagne was Holy Roman Empire, I believe.
Emperor.
Whatever, shut up.
Stop. Firebolt only got up about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, Charles the Great, numbered Charles I, was King of the Franks from 1768.
Oh no, it was a bit longer ago than that, actually.
Pretty much everyone in Europe and probably all white people are related to this guy.
So I'm royalty.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's sort of like, there's this idea in royalty about divine right due to being part of a certain family. It's like, well, scientifically, it's kind of bullshit, because really, families only really got royal because they had a big enough army to say, fuck off you.
What is political science?
It's sort of prescribing a sort of, I guess, pattern or sort of...
See, this is one of the things that I've been sort of considering when the government have been saying about following the scientific advice in any situation. Is that, yeah, but technically that also includes political science, doesn't it?
I guess, but I think they're talking about...
are they, though?
Advice about coronavirus, although generally that science is publicly available and it doesn't really say what they're trying to say it says.
It's easy to spin anything, isn't it? I mean, political
Yeah.
science is obviously part of the equation that they have to worry about. So
I guess you're kind of talking about like the PR of politics when you're saying that.
well, political science is a branch, isn't it? And it's I should link it back to sexism because it is politics is involved in sexism.
But like generally, like someone like Marx was one of the first people to sort of try and prescribe a sort of scientific model to how politics actually works.
What about Spencer?
You bring high quality social commentary to this podcast.
Well, I'm just the court jester, is what I am.
Okay. Okay.
I'm relying on you to populate the rest of this podcast with meaningful content.
I mean, that particular TED talk doesn't exactly say...
what does TED stand for in that respect?
I don't know. I don't think it stands for anything in particular. I think it's just sort of meant to be...
For some reason, I assume that the E is educational.
It might stand for something. We have to find out what TED means.
Technology, entertainment, design.
There's something we found out. It's not just a guy. But anyway, generally it was about sort of genetics and how generally trying to assign like being part of a certain family, like or being descended from Vikings.
See, if you connect that back to what I was saying about black people being more physically or being physically superior, there surely is that there is a point when you go back in time that there are separate routes. I mean, obviously, what I'm trying to say is that the further you go back, eventually geography starts to alter. And, but do we all have... how far back does our shared ancestry go in terms of, obviously, black people primarily came in Europe, in our...
If you're talking about,
world,
where they could be recognised as humans, there's generally two routes. One starting in sort of Africa area that moved up to supposedly the cradle of civilizations around Mesopotamia area.
But I'm assuming there must have been...
And then there's a group sort of around part of Russia.
I'm assuming there must have been a common link before that, though. You didn't...
Well, if you go back...
I have to assume that you didn't have humanity evolving as black people in one place and as white people in another place. They must have been linked before that somewhere. Because we were all... Was it Pangea? We were all...
the humans wouldn't have existed when Pangea.
No, but there must have been a point at which branches of the human evolutionary tree, if you like, branched off from each other and were separated and split.
The main
and then
reason for
back.
the skin colour being different was to do with how we absorb vitamin D.
Because, I mean, when we're talking about genetics,
really it's to do with the sun.
I don't think I might be, but I don't think I'm wrong in remembering that black people are statistically more likely to die of cancer or contract cancer.
That might have something to do with... I know there's something to do with like sickle cell anemia
as well,
where like your blood cells are shaped differently.
And so, I mean, if there are those traits that are statistically more prevalent in black people, then why can there not be a general physical fitness superiority? Is that just too complex a...
Well, the point is sort of generally the genetics of that are more complex than just saying, black people are better at jumping, for example.
It's more likely... Have you seen Trading Places?
No.
We should watch that. It's probably a bit dated now, 80s. Dan Aykroyd. Basically, it's about a couple of millionaires who have a bet for fun that they have like a sort of
I've seen variations on that sort of.
They try to swap two people, a homeless guy with a successful white man.
It's sort of a general sort of.
It's that nature versus nurture device.
I've seen that sort of trope in various things. And
that. Okay, there is a certain amount of genetics involved, but there's probably a lot more environment involved.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings you back to the sexism thing. Yeah. I don't know if this is something that you would necessarily, and I should have looked this up before, but because I don't know the actual words, but when I was a kid, and I think it's not done nowadays, but did you ever get taught the nursery rhyme, or did you ever hear the nursery rhyme about what our little boys made of, what our little girls made of?
Oh yeah, that's dumb, and it's like it. But
that
is just fucking propaganda. If I'm honest,
but that's recognised now. When I was a kid and I heard that was a genuine nursery rhyme that they used to teach children.
Yeah, I've heard it as a genuine nursery rhyme, and like that was dumb.
But do you know what it makes you feel like as a boy to be told that you are made of puppy dogs' tails and slugs and snails? And
there's that sort of thing, but also like it's that sort of thing. Oh, you're nice, and you're like, oh, you or fluffy essentially as a girl.
Yeah, I wanted to be nice.
Well, yeah, but like,
why couldn't I be made of sugar and spice and all things nice?
That's just dumb.
Doesn't mean that I want to be a girl. It just means, but I want to be.
If you didn't
allowed to, what?
Genetics is a bit more complex than that.
What? Like, there's not real puppy dog's tails involved.
No.
I thought that's what it was.
They didn't just put you in a cauldron somewhere.
No, I thought it was a puppy dog's tail.
No. Sorry to burst your bubble.
Well, I wag it as much as I can.
Jesus. Right. Anyhow, we're but to sort of bring it back to sexism, there is sort of this idea that there's some sort of innate biological genetic difference between men and women. Therefore, some of this discrimination is kind of related to science, right? But no, it's not.
Would you perhaps categorize that in the same way that when I was talking about the physical superiority of blacks, that actually, although there is some genetic sort of causes of any of that, there's actually a lot more environmental. Do you think that's a similar sort of thing with the men and women thing, that although there are some genetic differences, they're so minor compared to the social differences?
See, this is the thing with genetics, it's really fucking complicated.
Yeah.
Like an example, sort of 2% of our population, of the general population, is apparently intersex, which means that
I'm intersex.
But a lot of intersex people don't actually know they're intersex, and you're not going to be able to get
intersex?
Asexuals.
Okay,
you're not going to be able
asexuals who isn't intersex.
You're not going to be able to get past this. Go
on, keep going.
But yeah, quite a lot of people.
What does it mean? What does it mean? What does intersex mean?
Essentially means that
inter, not into.
Some variant of the sort of traditional idea of XX meaning female and XY meaning male, because there's quite a lot of variation within biological sex, regardless of gender. Where you could have XY chromosomes and have a working uterus.
Right.
And you could have XYY chromosomes, you could have...
well, that's the thing. As far as I was taught, there was XX and XY, and that was it. But presumably, if you're saying you can have XYY, did you say?
Yeah.
Does that mean that you can have more than 2 chromosomes?
Well, yeah, quite... I think it's maybe the 16th pair of chromosomes, because it's generally the pairs that are the idea, but sometimes there's a difference. Generally an extra chromosome on the 16th one, I think it's 16th, I might be wrong about this, causes Down syndrome.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of variation, and actually the idea of a Y chromosome is quite unusual because most of them are X.
See, this makes me think of, or brings to mind I know of people who are what I would regard as reasonably intelligent, who assume that there is no other, that have, for some reason, and I would have been among them. And like I say, I just thought there was XX and XY up until recently. But society has taught an awful lot of people who are otherwise very intelligent that this is the way things are and there is no other way.
Yeah. I think a lot of people sort of stop at that sort of high school level of understanding of biology.
So many people have this kind of, you're either a man or you're a woman.
Yeah, which isn't true of either sex or gender. And it's to do with the shape of your body. Yeah, but there's a lot of variation on this, and 2% of the population, it's a little bit different in Scotland, but 2% of the population is generally how many ginger people there are in a population. Like of the world population, so there's probably about as much intersex people as there are ginger people, and whilst here that's quite different because in Scotland we have one of the highest proportions of ginger people in the world. When you say intersex, what does that mean again? That's I mean, in a definition. See, I might be revealing some of my own misinformation here. Is that what are we talking about in a physical sense? And is that actually relevant at all? Well, there's quite a load of different ways that you can be this. So here we go. Because you get hermaphrodites, don't you, which have got both sexual organs. So that's would be an example of, I think, a difference in gonads or primary sex characteristics, like genitals. They have something different from what I'm quite interested in is what sort of percentages we're talking about when you I mean, obviously it's becoming a lot more accepted now to declare who and what you really are, and probably a glaring example of this would have been, like, say 50 years ago, people would have thought that homosexuality was very, very scarce. Well, yeah, there's that, but like also less than 20 years ago they stopped classifying homosexuality as a mental illness. Yeah. Which countries are we talking about here? 2004, the American Medical Association stopped considering homosexuality. 2004. That's scarily recently. No offense to 75% of our audience, but they are backward in a lot of ways. I mean, when I say backward, I don't mean intellectually backward. I think that was generally like an international sort of average, though. Yeah, I mean, having said that, it was criminal here until... it was criminal in Scotland until 1980, but it was... Is there equality in the age of consent yet? There is, yeah. There is now. There is now, but I think that I do remember possibly only stopped in like 2010, maybe even. Yeah, I do remember them lowering it from 21 to 18 and thinking, what's the fucking point? It's like no one it's different in Scotland as well, how they treat that as well. I thought that was the most ridiculous like how
gesture
yeah.
because it's like you're either going to make it equal or you're not. Don't fucking pretend that you're trying to by just going half-hearted about it. It's like, make it fucking 16 or don't.
Well, it's this sort of idea of like, oh, well, think of the children. It's like, well, they're not children at that point. If they're able to consent, they're not children.
That's not homosexuality.
Well, in Scotland, the way that consent works is essentially, if you're under 13, you absolutely cannot give consent. Any sort of sexual activity with someone under 13 is illegal. Although I'm not really sure how it works if two people are both under 13.
Experimentation.
Yeah. If you're
nobody to prosecute then,
between the ages of 13 and 16, you can legally have sexual activity with someone between the ages of 13 and 16, but if you're having sexual activity with someone above 16, that's still legally paedophilia. And if you're above 16, then you have
there's
the right
different
to
definitions,
give consent.
isn't there? Because is there not one of the offences is sex with a minor rather than paedophilia. Paedophilia, I think, has to be much younger, doesn't it? Does it? I don't know.
I think that would be if it was under 13. I'm not sure. It would be considered statutory rape, I think, because you're not legally able to give consent. Because they figured that if you're under 16 and having sex with someone over 16, that there must be some sort of coercion or something that would mean that even if you were saying that you were giving consent, you weren't really able to give that consent because there was some sort of exploitation or abuse of power there.
How does this relate to sexism?
It's sort of
Did
about
we just
sex.
get sidetracked?
Well, we did a bit. But I mean, sexism against intersex people is very much a thing as well. Considering like a fair amount of intersex people themselves don't even know they're intersex. Like a fair amount of doctors actually, if there's like a genital difference, if there's someone like with a vagina and testicles, for example, might cut off the testicles.
I mean, I frame these as questions that I'm asking you as though I assume that you know all the answers, but I suppose
don't know all the answers,
your
but
opinion on something.
Probably more knowledgeable than
what do you
most,
think?
I guess.
What do you think gender or sex-wise is meant by a ladyboy?
Oh, that gets complicated because generally that's a thing in Thai culture.
Yeah, well, they go on tour, don't they? The ladyboys of Bangkok. Who?
Yeah.
I mean, when you see some of them, it's like they're stunning. Like if they were females, they would be. Are they females? I suppose is one of the things I'm asking.
Well, see, there's differences of opinion with this, even amongst those who would be called ladyboys. I think I've heard it said that sort of generally, I think by the government that in Thailand they're considered as some sort of third gender,
right?
And trans people in general are considered as.
So are they accepted as
gender.
An equal gender?
I don't think so, because they're often really the only way they can make it and why they're quite popular as ladyboys is through sex work.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if this is something that you're more knowledgeable about or not, but I suppose there are lots of concepts that have come into general knowledge now that just weren't accessible when before the internet, basically.
Well, yeah. But there are loads of concepts on gender and sex.
I don't know if this is. I apologise if it is, but I don't know if this is a derogatory term. So I apologise if it is. But have you heard of and is a ladyboy otherwise known as a twink?
No, a twink's a term in the gay community, meaning sort of young and I guess skinny guy.
Right. Okay.
Just generally in gay terminology.
You tiptoeing around this.
There's generally twinks and bears.
Oh, are they furry?
Well, it's sort of the idea is that they might be bearded and quite hairy, and also probably a bit bigger.
Okay.
And maybe a bit older. I don't know.
So more of the daddy figure.
Well, yeah, that is generally sort of more the idea with that. Generally, the idea of a twink is that they're young. They're kind of a fuckboy.
How did we get onto this? I mean, I suppose sex is in the title, but
but
there would be an assumption looking at the title of this podcast that we were talking about prejudice against women or inequality.
We've talked about all sorts of prejudice in this, but
Pardon me.
Going back to what I was talking about with TERFs is generally the reason that they're called TERFs is they believe that feminism or sexism in general is based on biology. Like, for example, the issue of abortion, where you're a trans woman, that wouldn't really be something that you would have to be worried about for yourself, really. Because so far, there's no operation to get like a working uterus, as far as I'm aware.
No.
So I think they generally, so the idea with that is that they consider sexism to be only based on biology. But really, although some aspects of sexism are based on biology and like having a reproductive system like that, there's a lot more going on there based on gender, and trans women and trans people in general will experience a lot of oppression just based on being trans, let alone being a woman.
Do you know, I think it's a really difficult situation and I think it's something that we need to address as a society. The thing that made me think of it was this whole sort of Harvey Weinstein thing that went on, and that kind of pervading assumption that there is this, recognition that there has been this culture of male dominance in all industries or most industries. But it kind of, for me as a male, it is just as important to kind of unravel and extract ourselves from that kind of mentality for my benefit, because I don't like being associated with that. And
I think maybe what you're talking about is, although I'd assume you'd identify as male in your gender identity, you're not really identifying with the kind of, and this is a term that has a lot of, I guess, negative press around it, and generally people don't like this term, I guess. Toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
You'd want to distance yourself from that, which is fair, because it's not a good thing, and it's toxic to everyone in that situation.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think, because what did you say that it's got negative press or something, that term, toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
I can't imagine a positive spin on that phrase.
What I mean is negative press around the use of it. Like, people get annoyed at, say, feminists using that term and sort of take personal offence to that.
Well, that kind of flipped what I was thinking, because I was thinking toxic masculinity is definitely a thing, and I can't see any way in which it can be portrayed as something positive.
But like, I guess a lot of people, when they hear that, a lot of guys, when they hear that, would go, "Oh, well, why are you criticizing me when I haven't done anything?
Do you know what I think is?
But it's realizing that.
But the massive problem there is that you're not actually able to understand the way language works.
Yeah.
Because you've got an adjective and a noun, and they don't always go together. You know, you can be masculine without being toxic.
But I mean, there is a discussion on what ways you can be masculine without letting that be toxic.
Yeah, and what does masculine mean?
Yeah, but I mean, see, that's the thing with this being sort of relatively new to the general public as a topic of discussion, is that it's kind of a thing that language and the ideas around are evolving pretty quickly, and if you're not caught up on that, a lot of this can seem like, oh,
well, my general feeling, my gut feeling about the words masculine and feminine, I see masculinity as representative of something I don't respect. And femininity as being more in touch with positive vibes of like emotionally expressive and elegant and beautiful, you know. It is related to that nursery rhyme thing in that it does, for me, evoke images of negative, nasty things, masculinity, whereas femininity is nice, sweet things.
But I think it is worth seeing masculinity in some ways when done right, I guess, as a force for good.
Yeah, I can
see why that's
separating the words from, cause you can, I suppose, and it's betraying my sort of language usage through the years, is that I'm equating masculinity with strength.
Yeah, and strength can often be related to power, and power is often related to the abuse of such power.
But whereas I would actually see femininity as a more emotionally strong.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's generally related to, I guess, on that sort of sex level.
I feel like language is letting us down in all of this, because all of this talking about the masculine and feminine traits here is still dividing it into two sides.
But yeah, it's sort of, you need to realise that masculinity and femininity exist in all people in their gender expression. And it is important, I think, in our episode on gender, we did conflate gender expression with gender identity. They are different things. You can be very feminine in your expression and still absolutely identify as a man.
I'll say there's an awful lot of men that are like that, because I mean, is that not what people mean when they're talking about camp?
Yeah, I guess. But I think it's just sort of at the time when trying to lay out the distinction between sex and gender, we did say that language should probably change to reflect masculine and feminine, but gender identity is something quite different.
You've got so many different things going on here. You've got
I mean, the problem,
male and female, masculine and feminine.
The problem with gender as a term is it's used to mean quite a lot of stuff, but it's quite different.
Well, it's used for sockets and plugs in electricity.
Well, yeah.
This is kind of...
It's kind of gross when you think about it.
Yeah. It makes sense when you have that incredibly oversimplistic view of gender.
Yeah, it's sort of like that thing of people not understanding homosexuality because, they don't fit together. It's like, it's not fucking Lego, it's just people having fun. We got a bit sidetracked there.
Sexism. I'm trying to think.
But I mean, it's sort of going to that thing about, because quite often this is brought up in relation to films.
There were. Yeah, I was actually thinking when you said that, I was just trying to look back at the history of powerful women characters in things, and what popped into my head was a TV series called Dynasty. Don't know if you have heard of that. It was kind of around the same time that Dallas was about, if you'd heard of that. But it was like rich tycoons basically in the oil industry, and there were different characters in it. But two of the main characters in Dynasty were the main women in the Carrington and Colby families. One of whom was played by what's her name? She was a sex symbol. I can't remember now, but she was Alexis. But she was a really strong female character. Both the women in that were both very strong female characters, and this was in the 80s, so obviously at that time it was quite a revolutionary kind of. I mean, the men were kind of strong as well, but in actual fact, I think people were watching it for the women that were having cat fights and stuff.
Right.
But I mean, they were quite. Their strength was portrayed as being ruthless and nasty to each other, which again, it was the same for the men. But I think the fact that it was women that were doing it was more unusual. People were used to seeing men be strong and nasty characters.
See, that's the thing. It's sort of this association with strong as using that strength to be a dick, essentially.
Yeah.
And that comes back to what you were talking about with like our two female prime ministers were pretty fucking horrible. It's like
and my right back towards the beginning of the conversation when I said that I think of most men as complete dicks. It is. I mean, I actually don't. I think of masculinity in that way. I think I'm almost sexist in the opposite direction to my gender. It will have an effect on my self-esteem, and it's maybe something to do with coming from a single parent family, not having a dad around most of the time, that I'm very well, actually, maybe I should just carry on and complete that sentence and not correct myself and say what was flowing out there and say I'm very anti-male, even though I am one.
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of.
Does that make me sexist against my own gender? See, that talking about that Captain Marvel thing, I said on my podcast when I was talking about that this whole, I felt that when people saw that as having gender or having sexism, feminism rammed down their throats, I see that as people feeling threatened by it. Whereas when I watched it, and I said this, when she was having a kind of moments, if you like, my feeling on it was, oh yeah, you go girl. I was really behind her, and like really. But which is a weird.
That movie in particular.
I mean, I'm not kind of. Sorry, carry on.
The message sort of conflicted towards the end, where it was trying to sort of give that message of, oh, the reason they've succeeded is because they persevered when they were knocked down again and again. But in the end, what made them succeed was some explosion. Sorry, spoilers. A bit late for that, but if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Some sort of accident, like it. I mean, I guess you get that with superhero movies in general, where like their power.
It's all about gamma radiation, basically, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
but. I think...
Yeah, I mean, I guess, sort of seeing that as being different to any other superhero movie in itself is kind of a bit sexist.
You got to wonder whether or not secretly, well, not even secretly, but Stan Lee had a certain amount of a feminist streak in him, that because there's a beautiful irony to me in the fact that she, for a start, has the name of the entire franchise, Captain Marvel, but also the fact that she's so powerful that she's most of the time she's unheard of, but she's always working she's basically saving the universe.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
just
the thing with,
but
like,
not seen doing it. That's like femininity in society.
Sort of that joke about most of the superheroes being based in New York or America. It's like, well, what's the rest of the world doing? What's the rest of the galaxy doing now that they've introduced Guardians of the Galaxy?
There's loads of male superheroes, but they're all being seen big time doing what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? But she's just there in the background, just kind of off saving the rest of the galaxy, just coming back when she's needed, which happens to be like Endgame sort of time. But it's just like that to me does seem more of the woman's way.
Infinity War, like, because the rest of the universe beyond the Milky Way wasn't really involved with Thanos. I think, as far as I knew, he was just involved with, like, conquering the galaxy. Like, what did they think when everyone just started disappearing? Because it wasn't really on the news for them, would it be? Like, he made, like, half the universe disappear. So what did the rest of the universe outside of his galaxy think?
See, Thanos' problem, he needed to make it happen retrospectively as well. So people disappearing from existence can't be like from now on. It's got to be throughout time, because otherwise people are going to remember them. If everybody forgot that all those people had existed, then nobody would have known anyway.
I guess that's his problem, like, on a sort of how he was defeated, but like on a like ideological level of his whole plan, it was pretty fucked from the start.
But it wasn't actually that bad a kind of, I mean...
Well, aside from like the practical aspect of those people being repopulated probably fairly quickly.
Yeah, I suppose there is that. We are a bit of a virus.
You'd have to redo that every 100 years or so anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
But like... See, this is the thing with also with I think it's been called eco-fascism, where people are seeing this coronavirus as a positive thing because, people are going to die off, and they could not be polluting delay it. It's like, well, no, we still need to tackle that, and also, like, what the fuck, dude? Like, stop celebrating people dying. Like, chill out.
People die all the time.
Yeah. But it's
that's not celebrating it. It's just a way of coping, I think.
The idea of years of lost life, sort of like, okay, people die all the time from like old age and whatever.
Isn't it technically possible though?
But there's extra people dying, and
I know this is
affecting people a lot more now.
I know this is like a shot in the dark, like just a blind hope. But is it not technically possible that global warming was on the trajectory that it was, and it would have gone past a tipping point earlier had this not happened? However small an amount of time that might have been. Is it not a possibility that we may just have enough time to develop the technologies and the electric cars and get everything else and just pull back from the brink just in time because of what's happened?
So part of the problem is, like, I mean, we've got the technology for fairly good clean energy, and I think it's cheap. It's just people can't be asked to replace it, and like the people that's businesses based on these fossil fuels already have a lot of money to stop that business from disappearing.
That went downhill, didn't it? How are we gonna bring things round in a neat and tidy way to sexism?
Oh, I don't know.
Do you think we're ever going to have a female president in America? Well, I say we. Do you think they are ever going to have a female president in America?
Um, uh, hmm. See, with that sort of idea of seeing, like, for example, a lot of people supported Hillary Clinton seemingly on the basis that it's just, oh, it's going to be the first female president. And it's like, well, Hillary Clinton's still a dickhead. Like, she still supported war crimes in Libya and Iraq. And I know the guys around her also did, but, like, it doesn't make her good just because she's a woman. So, whilst I think it would be good if they could have a female president.
The major problem is, though, that anybody who gets into that kind of position has to have a thirst for it, and generally they're the worst people to have it.
Yeah,
the power.
It's like,
it's like, to get there, you've got to be a dick.
I think it's in, and this is a slight spoiler for, I think it's Restaurant at the End of the Universe.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the character of Zaphod Beeblebrox is meant to be the president of the galaxy, but it turns out the actual person that runs the galaxy is someone that never wanted to do it because that was the best system for finding someone that would be good for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, bringing it to UK politics, with Jeremy Corbyn, he had an unusual characteristic of actually having fucking principles, which apparently don't belong in politics. And I mean, I think he would have probably been one of the better prime ministers if he did become prime minister, but the very fact that he had any real qualities meant that he was doomed not to.
Yes. But,
yeah, it's sort of that thing of being good at policy, but really bad at politics.
do you have anything more to say, or are you happy to start winding up?
Oh, I probably have a fair amount more to say, but
I'm hosting another podcast on the network this week.
You're hosting?
I'm hosting, yes. It's my turn to host.
Oh, right. Oh, it's that music thing.
Ego, yeah. In
Right.
fact, it might be out before this episode comes out. If it's not, then it'll be out very, very nowish. But yeah, I'm doing the 90s for my decade. Spoiler.
I feel like that's probably the decade when you were least conscious.
Yeah, which is why it's my best decade for music.
True.
Now, the 90s, I think, for me, for my generation, the 90s were like musically, and possibly, I'm just glad I went through the 90s at the age I did, because it was very 60s, but in a different way.
But on the topic of intersex people, worth noting here, in April 2015, Malta became the first country to outlaw non-consensual medical interventions to modify sex anatomy, including that of intersex people. So, on the topic of sexism, given that whilst generally sexism talks about sexism against women, sexism against intersex people is still rampant, and literally there's only one country, I think, to outlaw non-consensual medical operations. I think that's non-consensual from the parents as well.
Slightly linked to that, I think, is although there are more risks involved, I think it's ridiculous that it's regarded okay to genitally mutilate boys. I know it's more dangerous to circumcise females, but
I don't know if it's really called circumcision, but yeah.
Yeah, well, they call it female genital mutilation, but it's kind of...
Yeah, they call that when it's in a culture that doesn't support that.
Yeah.
But like when it's circumcision...
I've heard it called female circumcision, but...
Oh, have you? Okay, I haven't heard.
I don't know if... but probably more often female genital mutilation. But I see cutting off a part of somebody's sex organs as abuse, regardless
if it's
there's
non-consensual.
if there's a medical reason for it as well. I mean,
Without a medical reason, if it's non-consensual, then
to the point where it's
do medical operations.
to the point where it's a normal part of culture, and that you'd be unusual if you weren't circumcised. It's
where
you're talking about chopping off part of somebody's dick. I mean, what the fuck?
But like where modifying sex organs might be necessary for trans people, like that's a consensual thing, and it's medically necessary because it's the medical operation needed to treat gender dysphoria.
Yeah,
I don't know how to end this podcast.
No. Shall we go and drink beer like men?
I'd rather not, thank you.
Oh, I'll tell you what we have been
Sounds
watching.
kind of gross.
What's the thingy, Bob? 2 pints of lager and a pack of crisps.
Yeah, that. I mean, just to make this a bit more fun, I guess, and bring this light-hearted, because we've been pretty heavy.
Why did you think she was going to be a lesbian?
What?
There was one character in it that you thought, I bet she turns out to be a lesbian. But
No, I hoped she was. I know she probably won't be, because it was the 2000s, but...
I wasn't that unusual then to be. I think one of them possibly does, but just not the one you were thinking.
But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the first season was made in 2001, and I made a comment watching. I think it was the first or second episode. There was like a zoo for straight people, because they are like.
It's
aggressively straight, but in a way that is all like poking fun at that.
Yeah,
so you're not really.
But it is in that transitional stage between.
It's one of those things with older shows, particularly comedy shows, where you're not sure if they're poking fun.
I think it was
the
on
ideas
the
that
crux
they're expressing.
I think that was why it did so well at the time, was because it was quite, borderline. It was going places that comedy tended not to have gone before, and that it was taking the piss out of that kind of.
But like the relationship between the two main male characters is quite often referenced in a jokey way as being sort of homoerotic, I guess, or at least sort of I think romance, that sort of idea.
I think that's around that sort of age, that sort of time, that it became accepted to talk in those terms. Before that, a bromance would have been, oh, that's gay, as though that's a bad thing. Like
at that time, that was pushing new boundaries and sort of being supportive. But nowadays, it's kind of tired out and a little bit sort of like, is that homophobic?
No, I mean, like now, if somebody, I've got a couple of friends that I could imagine if somebody said, that they're being all bromancy or whatever, I wouldn't take that as an indication that. I would now take it as an indication that it's okay to like other men.
Is it though?
As people, just it's okay to, and even to love other men as people without it being something sexual. As friends, just kind of platonic.
Although
it's not gay.
Like there's a lot of platonic friendships that should absolutely be gay in media.
Yeah, but what? The thing is, why does it have to become about sex? When sex gets involved, half the time it ruins relationships anyway.
Is that your view?
Well, of all the relationships I've had, only one has succeeded. So
I'm not going to push that. I don't want to. No.
What?
Just no.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
I mean, succeeded in terms of lasted.
Yeah, but like what you said before, I don't want to think about that.
What? I don't understand what you mean.
Good.
I'm going to leave that on a cliffhanger. You can explain to me off air, maybe.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Right. I'm not sure how much we stayed actually on the topic of sexism.
We did mention it occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of difficult with the news right now. not to talk
Isn't
about
everything?
racism.
Fortunately, it's kind of slightly related in some ways. Not in the causes, but it's just that it's still about inequality, I suppose. It kind of we could link it back.
But also to do with that sort of concept of racism and how
Jesus, imagine being a black woman, for God's sake.
Yeah. And
Feeling
gay.
for you. A black gay lesbian.
Yeah.
That must be hard.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, and also trans.
Let's see how difficult we can make it.
And I'm not sure what's the hardest religion
Disabled?
to be. Probably nowadays, actually, Muslim.
A black disabled...
In the Western world, it would be Muslim.
A black disabled gay trans woman.
And a Muslim.
And a Muslim.
Yeah.
There must be some.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Makes you kind of feel a bit more appreciative of your own situation, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing. Like,
there's always somebody got it
when
more,
people say,
more
like,
difficult.
that idea of white privilege or male privilege, it's like, okay, they're not saying that as a criticism of you necessarily, if you are white or male, or whatever other privilege.
I think
saying it, like, that's not an accusation. That's just asking you to realize what you've been given.
It's important to remember
there.
what arena you're talking about, because there is an argument to say that I would do better in the musical or theatre world if I was gay. I might stand a better chance. I mean, I know of situations where, I can't really go into details, but I know of situations where people have benefited from their connections, if you like.
I guess, but it's sort of in the context of like, okay, whilst you might have certain benefits in certain ways if you're part of a certain characteristic, like, it in no way outweighs the sort of shit that you've gone through for having that characteristic.
I would definitely say that I don't feel that I'm ever discriminated against by homosexuals because I'm straight. I might be laughed at, but there's no kind of... I've never felt that that's in any way kind of... I've never felt any kind of animosity from a homosexual.
Good. Anyway, I think we should probably end this.
Yeah. What's next episode about? Oh, by the way, happy 60th.
Happy 60th.
It's episode number 60. I should have said that at the beginning.
Right.
Really, but
cool. Also, happy Pride Month. It's June's Pride Month.
Is it?
So if you are LGBT,
if you are
proud, or if you're just proud in general, not sure what of. Cool. I mean, it's a weird thing with Pride Month because of like coronavirus. They can't really have any parades.
I've read a weird thing today.
What?
Oh, that was it. Because I've got this survey app on my phone where some surveys I get paid to do like 30 pence a time or whatever, but you do all these like in between ones as well. Just
grifting.
Like gathering what?
Grifting.
Grifting. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I guess.
Anyway, one of them was asking about what I thought about particular things, and apparently at the moment it's illegal. See, you can meet people outdoors, right, that aren't from the same household as you.
Right.
But technically at the moment it's illegal for a couple to have sex indoors if they don't live together. So does that mean that they can outdoors?
That's generally covered by other laws, I think. I think dogging's illegal.
But you know what I mean? It's just like, so if you're in your garden, is that legal?
I think that would come under public indecency.
Well, if you've got tall fences, maybe. But I mean, and social distancing, is that 2 meters face to face, or
does it count as 2 meters if you have a 2 meter long schlong?
or if you're taking them from behind?
What?
Well, I mean, if you're facing in an opposite direction... No, you couldn't face in opposite directions, could you? You could both face in the same direction, but not be facing each other.
Maybe if you put a strap on your butt.
Maybe we should stop now. Oh, yeah, that would work. Let's stop.
Yeah. Anyway.
I've been
Firebolt.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been episode
Very
60
awkward.
of Breaking Bollocks.
Sexism.
Jinx.
So have we done racism?
No.
No, are we going to do racism?
I think it's down as a subject.
And you swept this under the carpet earlier on, which I shall have to clean up later on. But what about jism?
Weirdly not a subject, considering I don't actually know what that would cover.
Well, I suppose it would depend how long it's been since the last time.
That's not how ejaculation works. I hope you know that. You don't just like fill up on cum.
Well, let's not have this conversation now. I can't. How do I turn things off?
It's your job.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.